Impact of Influence, the Murdaugh family murders. This is the unfolding story of a powerful South Carolina family, the mysterious deaths they are linked to, and our quest to bring you the truth. Hello, friend. We are so grateful that you spend some time with us. It's much appreciated. We've got the trial coming up of Alex Murdaugh. I also want to thank the folks at Court TV who, for some reason, continue to have me on. Vinny and Closing Arguments on Court TV, making a few appearances lately. Appreciate that. We appreciate your feedback. And you can reach out to us, Murdaugh Podcast on Facebook, MurdaughPodcast.com, and Matt Harris Podcast at gmail.com. Matt Harris and Seton Tucker. That's who we are.
So at the time we're recording this episode, we are less than 2 weeks away from the start of Alex Murdaugh's murder trial, which is begin to set on January 23rd. And speaking of Court TV, it has been announced that they will be exclusively broadcasting from the courtroom. That footage will be broadcast live, but will also be available to other media outlets.
So if any media outlet is using it, this is what they do in most of these cases. They have one organization take the feed, run the feed, and then other people can use it as well.
And it has been announced that the media and public are not allowed to take into the courtroom cell phones, cameras, laptops, or other digital devices such as Apple Watches.
And that brings us to our legal analyst. He's a former prosecutor and a former defense attorney. He's John Snyder. Hello, John.
Hello.
All right, Seton, let's start it off with John Snyder.
Okay, let's go straight into jury selection. There have been reports that jury selection will take up to 2 days, which is exactly what we saw in the Russell Lafitte trial. Any predictions on how long you think jury selection will take in the murder trial?
I would expect it to take up to a week. You are trying somebody for the potential outcome of life in prison. You do not want to rush through jury selection. And so courts tend to give much more time for jury selection in a murder case, because instead of asking somebody, are you comfortable sending someone to jail for a year? You're asking someone, are you comfortable sending them to prison for the rest of their natural life?
We'll get into some of the specific questions that were on the juror questionnaire. But John, how will the jury selection process work?
So the jury, they'll have the questionnaires. Then the clerk will start drawing names. It is completely random. It is in no way connected to the responses on the juror forms. The only thing that the juror forms are culled for beforehand might be somebody's, legally blind or legally deaf, and they can't serve as a juror. But otherwise, everybody that's on the list will be called into the juror assembly room, and then they'll get pulled into the courtroom, and the judge will have them take a seat.
And how many jurors will each side be able to strike, do you think?
It will be at least 6.
6.
And then we will see some wrangling for cause. And so for cause would be they ask you to get on, and you come to court dressed in a Grim Reaper outfit.
Okay.
And kind of this if you're charged with a crime, you're guilty.
And that won't count as one of their strikes. That'll just be...
that won't count as one of their strikes. That's correct.
Okay.
Reportedly, hundreds of people have been called as potential jurors. Will they say, okay, the first 150 come day one, or how do they work that?
It depends, but whatever they have the space for, there's no way you're going to cull through 150 in the first day. So I do think they might stagger them.
Well, and as of this recording, we don't have a decision from Judge Newman as to whether the public or media will be allowed in the courtroom for jury selection.
FitsNews released the questions that are on the juror questionnaire. John, is there anything that you find unique or out of line or interesting in this report?
When you look through these questions, I think they're kind of sound questions you would want to ask in any kind of major criminal trial, because what the lawyers are trying to find out is there some implicit, unspoken bias in your background that you may not come to the stand and say that you have a Blue Lives Matter or Black Lives Matter, or therefore you have a preset opinion about law enforcement. You don't want to be rude to these people that'll be deciding your client's fate. You ask these questions like, hey, what kind of shows do you watch? And it all is kind of to warm up the juror to open up maybe a little bit more about themselves than they naturally would.
One of the things that they did ask about was media consumption, which is similar to what we saw in the Russell Laffitte juror questionnaire. But they also asked about watching true crime shows like Dateline or 48 Hours and other shows like CSI. Is it normal to ask about those shows?
That's actually maybe one of the most standard questions, because the way that crimes are covered in an hour television show is not any way related to reality. In that, we don't go from murder to 10 minutes later arrest to conviction. The timeline that TV sort of makes people think of is not accurate. And so you would say, okay, I mean, I remember I ask this all the time, like, all right, now you all understand that everybody here understand there's a difference between what you see on CSI and what a real case is. And you know, I'd make a joke about there are no supermodels in the lab with backlit instrumentation doing the testing. Like that's CSI. That's not reality. But people are impacted by the media they consume. So that's why the both the defense lawyer and the prosecutor is going to ask, because you might have an unfair assumption about how law enforcement should do things. And so you're really trying to nail down are you going to apply the law as the judge gives it to the facts that are provided in court?
So you say they would ask the question when they were talking to jurors, but this is actually on the juror form. Why is that?
I think what this is doing is trying to speed it up. So
yeah,
if I get to, Mr. Harris, okay, I see that you like Mystery Theater 3000 and American Greed. Okay, well, tell me about what you like about those shows.
Okay.
Then I can start to develop your personality through your answers. And if you can hear the excitement, that jury selection is my favorite part of all parts of a trial. It is the most interesting and fascinating process of, I think, our legal system.
Well, they did also ask for lists of what television shows, podcasts, social media that you're receiving information from about this case.
And they say impact of influence, and they say dismissed.
Right.
I'm kidding.
There has also been a lot of chatter about the ability to find impartial jurors in Colleton County, and whether jurors could potentially be influenced by the Murdaugh name. John, do you have any thoughts on the ability to find an impartial jury in Colleton County?
I think you can. I mean, impartial does not mean devoid of opinion. It means the ability to set aside your opinion to follow the instructions from the judge. And so I do believe it is possible for them to find 12 people plus 2 alternates that can do exactly what the judge has asked them to do.
One of the things they do is they want to list, they want you to find out from the jurors groups and organizations they belong to, volunteer time, donate money. Do they give to certain churches? Are they members of churches?
They also asked about membership of fraternity and sororities.
They probably want to know if it's mentioned sporting. So I think that implies a few things. One is hunting, and another might be even be a USC Gamecock fan, because Alec played there back in the day, and Alec's family, all huge Gamecock fans, just like you are, Seton.
Yep.
And one of the reasons you ask that is people they might rush through the questionnaire, kind of like how people do with the terms and services agreement when they're signing up for something on the internet. And so you want to go back and ask these questions, because it may be you don't remember such and such, but what you don't want to have happen is that midway through the trial, you remember that your ex brother-in-law used to be a police officer, and he told you this story one time, and so that's why they asked all these questions, because the lawyer's trying to find the possible connection between you and the decision making that the judge is going to ask you to make. You want to cull the herd to make sure you get people that they don't have 18 people in their family that are all police officers. It's like, well, I mean, as a prosecutor, absolutely you want them, but the defense lawyer, you want to ask that, and you all the time people might leave out the fact, like, oh yeah, my brother-in-law is so and so. Okay, well, why didn't you write that in the questionnaire? Oh, I didn't really understand the question. Okay, well, that's why I like that you do the questionnaire, and then that gives kind of a background for the lawyers to start digging in on.
Well, you mentioned something earlier that caught my attention. Sometimes you're drilling down to get the potential juror's personality as a prosecutor or defense attorney, and you may work that into something, right? You find out this one guy who's on the bubble, maybe as the jury goes on, he's a USC fan. Maybe you drop something in there, right? Something like that.
That's right. You wear your garnet and black tie to jury selection. Like, from the defense standpoint, you're hoping you get your guy. We always had kind of a joking rule about you didn't want preachers, teachers, or engineers on your jury, because a preacher will always find the good in somebody. A teacher will, same thing. They just think things could be better, and an engineer isn't going to listen to anybody's word for it. They're going to have to go prove it themselves.
Interesting.
And so, different personality types. You want to explore all that so that that you've got people you are trying to find people that are inclined to your case. I mean, that's part of the adversarial side. Oh, you went to UVA? Okay, well, I have my orange and blue tie on today. Juror number 10, did you notice my tie? I mean, that goes on. That's part of the process.
We also want to mention that Eddie Smith has been listed as a witness by the prosecution. And if you remember, Eddie Smith is called Cousin Eddie. He is the one that was involved with the Labor Day suicide for hire plot where Alec was on the side of the road. He claims he hired Eddie to shoot him so Alec would die and insurance money would go to Buster. That's still being sorted out. Plus, Alec gave checks to Eddie of something, over $100,000 or something.
Yes, he's been accused of being in cahoots with Alec and running a money laundering scheme. My question to John is, the prosecution calling Eddie Smith, what do you think the defense will do with this? Well,
it allows Alec's side to totally cross-examine him and treat him as a hostile witness and show his bias, see if he got some plea offer in exchange for his testimony. I mean, they will run him through the grinder like there's nobody's business.
That's actually really interesting that you mentioned this plea deal. He reportedly had this polygraph test, and then after he may have indicated some deception on this polygraph test, the plea deal, from what's been reported, was revoked.
We don't know yet whether the judge will allow any mention of the polygraph, let alone the results, into the trial. Does this change anything if Eddie is called?
I don't think so. And I still don't think the polygraph's coming in. I just don't think that's going to be admissible evidence. The evidence might come in as you gave prior statements that said X, and those proved to be untrue, didn't they? Okay. Yes. Well, what other statements did you give that will prove to be untrue?
How is Eddie going to be a useful witness to either side?
I mean, I feel credibility is definitely an issue.
He may have unique knowledge consistent with, again, all this is hypothetical, but Alec called me and asked me to meet him out at the country house. I told him I couldn't. He said he had some work that he had to do, and if he didn't do it, he might need my help doing it also. Yeah, it could be something like that. And then he'd say, well, after the events, Alec called me and said he needed my help taking care of a problem out here at the country house.
So your point is well taken. That we don't know. We have no idea what Eddie might be saying. So yes, he's going to be run through the ringer, but we don't know yet what. I would love to see him.
I definitely want to be in court that day for sure.
Yes. But remember, of course, just because somebody's on the witness list doesn't mean they'll be called.
Well, let's move on to a settlement agreement that several of the victims of the boating accident where Mallory Beach was killed have reached a settlement with Buster Murdaugh and Maggie's estate. Buster was named in the lawsuit because he was accused of allowing underage Paul to use his identification. Mark Tinsley actually gave a quote on behalf of the Beach family to the state paper in which he says, "The Beach family feels like Buster had suffered enough and it is important to get Buster out of this lawsuit." So they definitely showed some compassion to him. Maggie was named in the lawsuit because she may have contributed to the accident by allowing Paul to drink and operate the boat. The agreement was reached with Mallory Beach's estate, Miley Altman, Morgan Dowdy, with the estates of Maggie and Buster. Connor Cook reached an agreement with Buster. He did not name Maggie's estate in his lawsuit. Connor Cook, who was Mallory's boyfriend, did not name Maggie's estate or Buster in his lawsuit, so he was not involved in this settlement agreement in any way. The agreement was signed off on by the co-receivers who were appointed to oversee Alex's finances, and also John Marvin, who was the personal representative for Maggie's estate. Matt, let's run down the numbers.
Okay, like $275,000 to the co-receivers, the legal fees, $290,000 to satisfy outstanding fees from Maggie's estate, about $6,500 or so to Laura Jones, interior designer, $25,000 because there's an outstanding claim to Palmetto State Bank. You've got a little over $12,000, John Marvin Murdaugh, for personal funds he advanced on behalf of the estate in satisfaction of outstanding creditor claim against the estate. Now, he is waiving his fee as PR. $100,000 to Joe McCullough as counsel for Connor to release the claim against Buster. $530,000 to the estate of Buster, and an unknown balance to Mark Tinsley, as well as Maggie's 2021 Mercedes SUV. Tinsley is able to get that and sell it.
Let's start with a listener question from Nancy.
Nancy asked about the settlement with the Beach family. She says she read an article in FitsNews, and that said the receivership is part of the settlement, but Alec is not. Nancy's a little confused on that. She'd love to hear your explanation, John. How can they reach an agreement with a receivership that doesn't include Alec?
Well, the receivership is acting in place of Alex. So they can make the financial decisions related to the release of monies and claims against the corpus or the body that is the funds. And so the disclaimer by Alec, while that's still kind of under appeal or whatnot, the receivers really are the ones that are making financial decisions at this time for Alec.
And we see they're not cheap. I mean, their fees were pretty expensive, $250,000. Was that it?
$275,000 to the co-receivers.
For the co-receivers, and there were a lot of legal fees involved. According to Mark Tinsley, it seems as if they're trying to come to some sort of resolution while there's still money to be had.
That's right. And so receiverships are a fantastic vehicle, but they are not cheap. And a lot of times in business disputes, when business partners sue each other and they're like, and a receiver gets appointed, most of the time the receiver ends up eating up all the assets that would have been left in a company. They're effective and they do their job, but they will eat up whatever money might be there that the two parties are fighting over.
Anything else jump out at you when you see those numbers?
John Marvin's advancement of the funds, that's kind of odds and ends bills that needed to get paid that were in Maggie's name. And so all that's actually pretty clear, and it seems like this is kind of the final accounting as they close out her estate and any of the claims against it.
All of her estate will then be accounted for. It's done.
That's right. It'll be a closed estate file.
What impact will Alex Murdaugh trial have on this, if any?
I don't think any. I mean, what I see in this settlement is the fact that everyone is now focused on Parker's. And so the money that could have been gotten from anyone with the last name Murdaugh is been gotten, and so now they're going to focus the trial on Parker. So it's ironic that you filed this motion to separate the claim. It was granted, then it was reversed, and now it looks like they'll have settled with almost everybody except for Parker. So in essence, the only people going to trial will be Parker's.
And Alec, right? I mean, he still has his estate.
It doesn't seem like he has anything.
Right. And also, a lot of the settlement, these numbers hinge on the pending sale of Moselle and that property. So we'll wait on that. And you said there's a hearing coming up?
There's a hearing next week, which will actually happen before the start of the murder trial in front of Judge Hall. So this is all pending his approval and also the approval of the probate court.
Right. I'm going to share this email while John is with us. Matt Harris podcast at gmail.com. This is from Laura, who is an attorney. She says, big fan of the podcast, big fan of John Snyder. He makes your show. You guys are great, but the legal perspective is vital, and he's really good. Matt, I could not agree more with you talking about the disparagement of Dick Harpootlian. She's referring to what I was saying earlier in a podcast or an episode, that attacking Dick Harpootlian just for defending Alex Murdaugh is unfair. You can attack him for other things, but she says, I do defense work, and if people were attacking me for doing my job, I'd sue. It really makes me mad when they do this. He has a job to do. Our legal system depends on it. Now, I have disagreed with John's statements as to why prosecutors become defense attorneys. The answer is much more simple. It's not for the love of litigation. It's simply for the significant amount of money that can be made in private practice. Former DAs are absolutely great hires across all areas of the law. Great job. Great job, John. Keep on, keep it on.
Great job, John. We couldn't agree more.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Love doing it, and can't wait for jury selection.
You got it. See you, John.
Bye.
This past week, we had an article from a local reporter, Michael DeWitt, in which he interviewed the Colleton County Clerk of Court, Rebecca Hill. And they talked a little bit about Walterboro preparing for what may be huge crowds and the biggest thing that Colleton County has ever seen. In the article, Hill is quoted as saying, "We have kind, compassionate people here who are coming together like never before to let the outside world know that Colleton County is not the crime that happened in its jurisdiction. We are much better than that, and we stand together to make our town a safe place to live and for the families to grow and work and play." And on that sentiment, I thought it would be a great idea to bring Sara Holstein Graves in, who has been on our podcast on several episodes, to kind of go over a little bit of the history of Walterboro and Colleton County.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, how are you?
We're fantastic. Let's find out all about Walterboro.
Okay, so Walterboro, it's about 20 minutes away from Hampton, so it's pretty close, and a little less than an hour away from Charleston. It was founded in 1783 by two brothers by the last name of Walter. One of the brothers' daughter had contracted malaria. So as you know, down by the coast, the mosquitoes are terrible in the summer, and malaria was actually a fairly common disease. And so planters started moving towards Walterboro in the summer, and some of them actually just stayed there. In the beginning, it was called Hickory Valley because of all the hickory trees that were there. And it still has a lot of historic homes that are dating back to the 1800s. So if you do come to town for the trial, it's worth a little drive around the Main Street area to look at some of these beautiful old houses. They were designated the county seat of Colleton County in 1817. And they built the courthouse and the county jail in 1821. What's really cool about the courthouse is it was designed by Robert Mills, who was an architect from Charleston, who designed a lot of very famous buildings. He designed the first Washington Monument in Baltimore, as well as the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. He designed the USC campus. The fireproof building in Charleston, which now houses the South Carolina Historical Society. And probably one of the more famous ones, the old Patent Office building in Washington, D.C., which now houses the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery and the Smithsonian American Art Museum. So he designed that courthouse.
It's an absolutely beautiful courthouse. It really is. beautiful place.
In the 1880s, the railroad line was established, and that connected Walterboro with both Columbia and Charleston. So that made it a little more metropolis-like. This I found super interesting. In the 1930s, they established the airfield, which is where the National Guard has a post now. In 1942, during World War II, it became the home of the Walterboro Army Airfield, which was a sub-base of the Columbia Army Air Base. They operated as a training base during World War II, training advanced air combat to fighter and bomber groups, and they had the largest camouflage school in the United States. They also had a POW camp. But in 1944, they changed command and became an advanced combat training base, primarily for trainees graduating from the Tuskegee Army Airfield. So over 500 of the Tuskegee Airmen trained in Walterboro.
Wow, did not know.
And they do have a monument there to the Tuskegee Airmen, which I thought was great.
It is great.
That was a little piece of history that I found very interesting. I-95 arrived in the 1960s, so that made Walterboro a big overnight stop, a potty break, a dinner break, and so that end of town began to develop more around the interstate. In the South, we all have different festivals. In the Hampton County, it's the Watermelon Festival. In Walterboro, it's the Rice Festival. So every year around the end of April, they hold a big festival. It's been going on for a long, long time. And during this festival, they do operate primarily in that area around the courthouse. They close down some of the streets. They bring in food vendors. They bring in little fairground rides. They hold a 5K.
Sarah, I want to talk about the food truck situation in Walterboro. Obviously, hundreds of people showing up for the trial, and the Walterboro Wildlife Center, which is across from the courthouse, will serve as the hub. And local small business owners with food trucks have been requested to help meet the additional influx of people coming into the area for the duration of the trial, and they'll be set up in the parking lot next to the Walterboro Wildlife Center. And I don't really understand why there was some people and some broadcasters giving a little heat and throwing a little shade at the community for doing this. It's something that's definitely needed.
Yeah, I just didn't fully understand the criticism. I get it. It's not a festival, and no one's really saying that this is a festival, but there's going to be a lot of people there, and everyone is going to need to eat. I had actually kind of thought about this before they announced these plans, that I would have to maybe pack a sandwich or something like that and just eat in my car at lunch. So I'm very thankful that there'll be other options beyond that.
Well, if you look at it from an infrastructure perspective, let's say that everyone that's attending this trial, including the attorneys, they get a break that's going to last, let's say, from 12 o'clock to 2 o'clock. You have this mass exodus of people leaving the courthouse, getting in their vehicles, driving across town to one of the few options that there are for dining, trying to all get fed within that time frame, and then all getting in their cars and driving back. True. And trying to find somewhere to park. So this just takes all of that out of that picture. It is a safety thing. It is a restaurant can only hold so many people. They can only serve so many people. It's a timing thing. It's a convenience thing. And again, because they do this so regularly, from an infrastructure point of view, they have the ability to do it. They have the training and the experience to do it. Walterboro still holds a First Thursday event once a month where they close down Washington Street, and the stores that normally close at 6 o'clock stay open later. They have a band come out. They have the restaurants open, and it's to encourage people to come out and shop and dine and help with the businesses on the Main Street area. So this is that aspect of it they're doing once a month. The Rice Festival they're doing on a much grander scale once a year. So to me, not only is it a good opportunity for them to bring some vendors in and maybe make some money, but from a safety standpoint and from the standpoint of trying to make sure the court is running on time, that you don't have people straggling in because they couldn't find anywhere to park or they didn't get their food on time or whatever like that. It's a way to keep things on target and running efficiently.
Did you actually have a chance to look into the rice festival? Is it the Carolina Gold Rice?
It is not the Carolina Gold Rice, but I did look into Carolina Gold Rice. It was all over the Low Country, but it kind of died out. And a very short time ago, a couple from Hardeeville who were growing rice contacted the archives, and they actually had some of the Carolina Gold rice seeds still kept. And so they let them take those and plant them. And they've brought the crop back from that.
But I just I'm a culinary person, and this Carolina Gold Rice is like this.
It's a special kind of rice?
It's a special kind of rice that a lot of the top chefs in the country are using,
Really?
Especially in Charleston. And it's a heritage rice that they just brought back from extinction.
Well, it was brought over from Africa, and the slaves that were brought from Africa knew how to plant it, to tend it, to harvest it, to cook with it. And so it was another one of the wonderful offerings that came into our culture because of the African slaves who were here. And then, it kind of died out over time. I don't know why. And then it was recently brought back. And so it's a gourmet thing. You're right. It's the top chefs. That's all they use. I believe it's like a less carbohydrates in that rice than it is in regular white rice. And it's got that gold color to it.
Why isn't you haven't seen made Dwayne and I rice? So waiting on.
Well, I actually have made Carolina Gold Rice, and I can tell you the best way to make it. So I will. I'll post a link to our Facebook page in case anyone's interested.
Yes. Anything that we have forgotten you want to add, Sarah?
No, I just think that we need to show a little bit of grace to the folks that are running the infrastructure there in Walterboro, because this is absolutely, circus come to town that they didn't ask for. And they are doing the best that they can with what they have. Applaud them for it. I think they've handled all of this beautifully to this point.
They've done a great job just keeping everyone posted of what's going on. And I think logistically, they're doing a fantastic job.
Sarah, thank you.
You are welcome.
We'll see you soon.
Before we wrap, I do want to offer our condolences to Judge Newman's family, who experienced a loss of one of their family members this week.
And we forgot. Well, I didn't see it, so it's not on me. I'm just kidding. You said there was a comment about us talking too fast?
On one of these Facebook sleuth groups I'm on, someone under our episode said that we were talk too fast, and they usually have to listen to it several times because we talk so fast. And I said, well, you've been up usually since 3:45 in the morning.
Yes.
I don't know why I talk so fast, but I completely forgot to keep that in mind this episode. So if you are listening on, I know Apple does it. I think several of the other may also offer those options to listen to it on a slower speed, but I will try to be mindful in the future.
Me too. I don't know why I talk so fast. I always have, but I'm going to go slower. We always appreciate feedback, good, bad, and different. And you can get to us through the Facebook page, Murdaugh Podcast, MurdaughPodcast.com, and Matt Harris Podcast at gmail.com. We will talk soon.